Hello everybody and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast for this week. The Magical Learning Podcast is a podcast that takes important topics in business and life and looks at them in a fun and lighthearted way. And today is no different, except we're taking on quite a big topic, which is recovering from a setback. It's something that I think we've all experienced in the last 4 years with nothing else, if not COVID. But people experience setbacks all the time. How you bounce back is really important. Today it's just a one-on-one with me and Danette, so we both really break down. It actually gets a little emotional, which is quite nice. But anyway, enjoy. I hope you enjoy this one as much as all the other ones. And as always, everybody, have a magical week. Hello everybody and welcome to the Magical Learning Podcast. If you're watching today, you'll see it's just me and Danette. We're going to be having a fun little conversation. That's a reflections podcast for this week. But before we dive into that topic and everything, Danette, you're in a new location. There's someone whose head keeps popping up behind you. So do you want to tell us a little bit about where you are and what's going on with you?
I'm at a friend's place, Connie, so she is in the background a little bit. I've got one of the dogs is saying, in fact, two of the dogs are saying hello to me at the moment, which is pretty cute. So in Canberra, I've been in and out of Canberra this last week. I've had a bit of training and heading home after this to the farm for the weekend. So looking forward to that because I've been pretty much on the road for the last week and a half.
And you had Eric and Ava. So Ava popped in very briefly into our last podcast. If you want to listen to the first 5 minutes of that one with Marcel, fantastic episode. But Ava was on that one. So Ava and Eric live in the US. You hung out with them a little bit as well?
Yeah, so Eric flew in on Sunday, we hung out at the farm, and then I was just saying to Jez, we went and watched a movie. So Ava's about to walk the Camino walk in Spain, only I think 100 kilometres, and she's doing it where they take the bags from hotel to hotel, so she's doing it pretty easy. But we went and watched this movie by Bill, I think it's Bennett. He's an Australian film maker, and he walked the whole Camino walk, which is 780 kilometres, and he did it in 31 days, and he had a sore knee when he started, so he did extraordinarily well, and a great movie. And just looking at the beautiful scenery, I'm like, that's definitely on my bucket list, going to go and give that a go. So it looked fabulous. He carried all of his stuff, so 10% of his weight he carried on his backpack and slept in different places. Yeah, but it was amazing. Highly recommend that movie if you're interested in doing perhaps a nice long walk in Spain.
Absolutely. Sounds pretty good. I like that you said it was only 100 kilometres that Ava has to do. So rough.
It's over a few days.
Yeah. And we should say, I don't think we highlighted this, that Eric is your brother and Ava is my cousin. Yes. Now, if people also are liking just how you and I are talking to each other, I think we can officially announce this, that the Adapt with Danette FM Season 2 is underway. So you can go check that out right now. That is mostly going to be Danette talking to people about adaptability and problem solving and collaboration this season. And it's just it's a companion podcast to your book, which I have right here, The Adaptable Leader. So if you are on YouTube or on Spotify, you can check that out and see the imagery of that. But otherwise, you can go get that book. But Season 1 was a massive success, so we are really excited to have Season 2 now. So very exciting. And also, another thing, if you're liking this podcast, please go check out the artwork. It has now been updated. We've got a new artwork for the Magical Learning Podcast, so that's very exciting. We had the old one since basically the very beginning, and we're up to episode 209, I think, this one that we're doing, or 208. So it's been there for a long time, but very exciring. So
a big thank you to Allegra for doing that, and Jez for you collaborating with her so that we got it right. So everyone, we'd love your feedback, but thank you so much, Leggers.
Yes, Leggers, who has been on this podcast many times. So even last week with Marcel as well, actually. Yes. A good one there. Thank you to Leggers for that one. Great job. So this week we're doing a Reflections podcast. Now, for people that don't know, our Reflections podcasts are ones that we do just with the team occasionally, where instead of sort of me offering up questions to the team, I just offer a topic and you kind of go by what you're inspired by based on that. I highly recommend people going and listening to our other Reflections podcast. There was International Hug a Worm Day became something that we did. So there's many interesting ones to listen to. But today we're going to be talking about recovering from a setback. I think this is something that happens in both business and life. It's just part of sort of being alive. But it's sort of about having that ability to bounce back. I've got a couple of examples. So maybe I'll start with one of mine and then we'll go to you, Danette. So one that I wanted to talk about recently is a change that I've made in terms of how I perform. So for people that don't know, I do stand-up comedy pretty regularly, about once a week. And I recently have changed that to do something that's a bit more musical, and it's got a lot more loop pedal type stuff. And I realized it wasn't a setback in a traditional sense that made me want to change. It was that I realized that, well, the setback was that it was emotionally only, I'd say, 70% fulfilling doing stand-up, so which is more than most other things. You know, most things probably sit at a hum of about 20%, but 70% was good, but I realized it wasn't fully what I wanted to do. So I started just doing this thing where I would go up, I'd do a little bit of stand-up, and then I would sort of improvise a song on the spot that was funny, and that has sort of taking that sort of emotional thing where I was going, this isn't fully what I want to be doing, and I know that I'm doing this, I'm not getting paid, most times to do it, so I'm doing it purely for my own emotional kind of development and maybe building some skills. But I think the setback was just having to look back and go, this isn't actually it, and I've just got to take a swing on whatever this sort of new form is and see if it's interesting. And it has been working a lot better. It's, I had someone even message me last night saying, hey, that was really inspiring, do you want to hang out? And so I thought that was really good, because the person that sent that was this amazing Latin Spanish guitarist who has all these amazing skills.
Oh, so wow,
I was shocked.
That's
that
awesome.
they said that, but I don't know, I think what I've realized in some ways as well, being able to kind of look at this and go, this wasn't fully exactly what I wanted to be doing, is that one thing I was kind of, I guess, able to realize is that, maybe some of the things that are set up, they're not the only structures that have to exist. You can kind of create your own thing. Like what I'm doing, there's not really anybody else doing that, but it's because it's just coming from me. This is, even going up there the first time and just thinking, will I be able to improvise a song? Because if I don't, I'm going to have people just staring at me like, what happened? And that is exactly what happened as well. The first time I did it, I was doing probably about 1 minute songs, and I'd finish them and people would just look around. They wouldn't even clap. They'd be like, what just happened? But now it's a bit more, refined and people are more into it. But I guess the other thing was that I think I wanted, initially when I was doing stand-up, I was like, how can I make this as funny as possible? But I realized what I actually derive my joy from is making things as fun as possible, which are similar, but not exactly the same. And so being able to kind of realize that maybe I'm not a comedian or a musician, but I'm more a performer as a broad thing is kind of what, being able to look at that, and even though it was good, seeing it as like, this is not what I want to be doing in a way. It's not super fulfilling. So, so that was my first example of sort of recovering from a setback.
That. And what I love about your answer there, Jez, too, is that you've tried things, sometimes they don't work, and that's okay, and that's part of getting, isn't it, to the other side. And we might try a lot of times before it actually feels like, and I love that distinguishment. You've gone, it's not about funny for you, it's about fun and fulfillment, because each of us is guided by our values, the things that are important to us. So to be able to go, I'm just going to try different things and see how they go, and when they fall flat, not go, okay, I'm going to quit. It's like, okay, I'll change something and try something different, to the point where you're obviously doing really well because of that person who's reached out to you. So and I love that, because that's also another F, which is feedback. So you've got feedback, sometimes not working so well, sometimes working so well, but it's allowed you to get closer to what's more important for you and more fulfilling for you. So I love that.
Thank you. I guess in this way, it was like not realizing it so much as a setback, but realizing it almost as a limitation of the top level of what I could experience. That. So I'm just like, how can I increase the ceiling of this? Because I'm sort of bumping into it constantly, and it's not. I know there's something else there. But Danette, I'm fascinated when this topic, recovering from a setback, what does that kind of mean to you? What does that stir up for you?
One that comes to mind, and it's what I opened my first book with, is we had a business partner that went belly up a week before Christmas a number of years ago, taking out 90% of our income. And I think my reflection on that is, when something big like that happens that's unexpected, our natural instinct, I think, is to try and control what's going on. When we start to try and control, we're often fear-based in that control, which is a natural response. But it also chews a lot of energy. And so in those things where things are not going as we need them to, we need to be mindful of conserving our energy, and because we need our brain to be working really effectively. And so as I was driving over to Connie's, I was thinking about what's one of my key things I get when I think about setback. And it's an S word, which is surrender. So what I've learned is the faster I surrender and just go, okay, this is what it is. So rather than, because when we start to control, we tend to try and want it to be something different. And it's like, actually, you just need to accept that this is exactly what it is. Whether you like it or not, it's happening. Because when you accept it, through that surrender, then you can go, okay, what do I need to do next? And it's not about what do I need to control next. It's about, okay, this is what's going on. What would be most helpful? And because you're not sort of in that, as much in that fear-based brain, you ask better questions. Yeah, during that time, always used to ask Robin Sharma's question, what's the opportunity here? And that I knew would keep my brain open to possibilities that if I went to the control and tried to fix it all when it wasn't fixable, that would just create more angst and, fear and waste of energy, etc. When I think of accepting, which is my model around adaptability, which means we're authentic, we're curious, we collaborate, we experiment, we problem solve, we transform, and we are sustainable. I think of surrender a bit like accepts. So what we see when people go through hardship is some people will reject it and they're like, no, this is not happening. And that's quite a natural reaction. The problem is then you're fighting against something that is already there. And so you're not using your energy, your focus on, okay, I surrender to what's going on. What do I need to learn from it? How do I move forward? Who can I talk to, etc. So that whole idea of just going, okay, what's the reality here? What can I do? What do I need to just accept is going to happen, and I just need to move through that process. Who can support me? I think all of that's really important because, again, our brain tends to, when bad things happen, tends to shut down, and we don't necessarily always then go out and ask for help. We are all hardwired. So, Jez, if I said to you, Jez, can you help me with something? Your brain's naturally going to go, yeah, of course. If I've got the energy, the answer is yes. As human beings, but most people don't like asking for help. And yet, when we're going through setbacks, there's probably someone who's been through it already who could give you some insights to make it easier. Or they might have contacts, or they might just have a suggestion where you're like, that's gold, because your brain couldn't see it at the time. So that's my first one, Jez.
Yeah, well, I think kind of piggybacking off that, I think it's kind of another one that I think is probably good to talk about is this, like how this helped you when COVID kind of hit.
Yes.
With magical learning, because I think.
Yep.
I think we've talked about this on the Adapt podcast,
yes.
But I think maybe it's worth reiterating here because obviously COVID was a setback for the entire world. I think we're still actually recovering as a society. There's still elements that are still getting picked up and stuff. But I guess sort of using that first example you're talking about where you lost all that business, how did that help you when we come to COVID, help people recover from setbacks?
Yeah, great question, Jez. So as soon as COVID started happening, we lost all of our work like overnight, within 3 days or something. And because we'd been through complete uncertainty, blindsided because the business partner that went belly up had got a green tick on a financial audit a month before. So we could not have predicted it with all the risk management, etc. And so we knew that everyone would be struggling with how do we move forward. And because we'd had to, reimagine who we were, what we were going to do moving forward, because that business we could not go back to, it was like, okay, let's talk to people about how they navigate through fear, how they teach their kids from home, how they stay resilient, because they were all things, how they ask good questions. So we sort of learnt our lessons and shared them with others. And we did all of that free. We ran webinars and stuff just to support people going through that who obviously had not been through anything like that before. And a couple of months later, all the work came back and more. So I think part of it also is once you've gone through that, it's looking to share those lessons with others who might be experiencing it later on. Not looking for any financial reward or anything, just supporting them to be able to navigate it. Because when we support others to think better and think more broadly, they don't have to go through all the fear and the scared. And, people make really bad decisions when they're in that headspace. So to support them to be better, it's just really fulfilling. And, it has certainly helped us navigate lots of change since then. So I also see the flip side of when it looks like it's a disaster, there's often a really gem of a lesson that, if you're willing to reflect on that, can actually help you move forward when you suffer setback much smarter than you would if you didn't experience that. So I actually see that as, while it was bad at the time, now I see it as one of the best lessons we ever had.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, that is often the case, I feel like, is that these sort of bad things end up acting as a lesson or a guide,
Yes.
or can help you help someone in the future.
Yes.
I think also, speaking on kind of what we've been talking about and, looking at recovering from a setback, Kanika and I actually last night were talking about how if you take on too much, and I think this comes back to your point about surrendering what is and what is not, and if you're spending a lot of time fighting that, you don't have a lot of room in your life for chaos to happen, which is just a natural part of the world. It's always going to happen. Something random will happen. A random bill will appear that you weren't expecting, something like that. And if you aren't giving yourself a little bit of space to allow for that stuff, you're going to look at burnout can just happen out of nowhere, I think. You can be sort of on a right track and probably doing a little too much, but you can sustain it. But then if something gets thrown into your life, maybe you get sick, which is very common at the moment in Australia here, or if you get injured or anything like that, all of a sudden you didn't realize, but it's a sort of house of cards, and it can all totally crumble very quickly. So there's definitely got to be a little bit of space, even if you're thinking like, I can probably do this and take on this extra stuff. Sometimes it is good to have a little space for chaos, just in case. Yeah, the other thing that I want to talk about was recovering from a setback was that I'm someone that really likes exercise. I find it's a pretty important part of my life. And I have, for people that don't know, I have a sort of rare skin condition that gets injured quite often. So often, I'll get 3 weeks into a running schedule and then I'll get blisters on my feet and I'll be out for 2 weeks. And I think what I've kind of learned from that is that setbacks are such a natural part of, in this case, my skin, but in everybody's life, they're a natural part. And I think not planning for them can really attack you in some ways. I think of myself, especially when I was a bit younger, when a setback would happen, how much it would throw me totally out of a loop and I'd have no idea what to do. Whereas now I think with more different hobbies and things like that, there's other ways I can catch myself. If something goes wrong in one domain, I can go do some embroidery and I can, just listen to a podcast and relax. I hope people are doing embroidery and listening to this podcast. But, it's that kind of thing. I can go play music. I can play video games, anything. Just are there things that I can can I build up these base level? Can I go play basketball, for example? Is there little bits and pieces that if something hits me, can I fall back and build up a little bit of something and then get back out there as well?
Yep. And you've just reminded me of a tool that we used to talk about, which is actually really quite helpful, because often when setback happens, we go sort of down that rabbit hole, this isn't good, etc. And it's basically you ask yourself, will this matter in 5 weeks, 5 months and 5 years? And so it's designed to give you that longer term perspective to go, it might be really rubbish now, and longer term, I probably am not going to remember this particular thing. So don't give it all of that energy that we do, particularly when we're young. But I think still sometimes when we're not expecting it, our brain just goes, blah. And the problem with the blah is then we get stuck in that fear-based rather than going, setback and the chaos. I think sometimes chaos actually, if we sort of flip it, could go, well, maybe there was too much in my life. So maybe part of the chaos was actually to clear, for me to work out what's important and what's not. Because sometimes, we'll accept stuff and go, oh yeah, we'll do that on top of this, on top of this. And there's a point where, okay, well, maybe some of that needs to be cleared out again. And that's okay too. So I think it's also the opportunity to revisit what's really important to you And can you do it in different forms? And I like how you sort of went, well, if I can't run, I might try this, I might try this. But you were trying different things. So also I think part of your, like what you've just shared with the listeners is don't focus everything on one thing. Because I think if you put everything on one thing, if something bad happens in that one thing, you have nothing to fall back on. You need variety. For example, today I had to go to Officeworks, had to go to Officeworks because I've been using so many pens, I've run out of pens. But they had, like, I like to go to the artwork area, and they had these beautiful luminescent watercolours. And they weren't very much, like maybe $14. And I was like, I'm going to buy that for myself. And this weekend I'm just going to go and paint some stuff. And I think it's following, when you were talking about the fun, following, whether it's your fun, your joy, to have many things in your life. So when setbacks come, you've also got many other things you can fall back on to give you a bit of fun and joy and not just make it about the one thing.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And I think with that as well, it's also, when I guess talking about leaving space for chaos, there's also got to be leaving space for failure as well.
Yes, totally.
Because I think, I think failure can be very difficult for everybody. It's a thing we're hardwired not to want to do, It's because, when we were sort of like cave people, a failure could be life and death,
Totally.
So, we're not designed for it. And, there's a lot of therapy books that are about,
Yes.
if you experience failure, it can be very catastrophized in your own mind. So I think factoring in a little bit of that, and that is also about the support that you were talking about before. If you can get that support, if you can help build support for someone else that can be there to support you, that gives you that sort of, so I guess thing to sort of lean on when you're feeling the worst parts of failure, which is just going to happen as part of life. Yeah, and because I think, I've realized, like, especially just going back to this music thing that I've been doing more, it's so different coming from a stand-up perspective into a music world because stand-up is so built on failure. To craft 5 good minutes, you've probably got months of work.
Yes.
To, where these jokes don't work. For example, for last night I was testing out a joke. I've been trying some new jokes about how I look, and I was doing a joke about, I was trying to decide which is funnier. Do I look more like Ellen DeGenerate or felon degenerate,
Which one landed? I like
Ellen
both.
DeGenerate is the one, but that even having those two options, one of those is going to fail out of those two, and that's just part of it. You got to, if you can have that thing where it's like, okay, some of this is not going to work, some of it is going to work. And I notice it when because a lot of the musicians, for them, it's about going up, being good at music, trying to remember everything, making sure they kind of, musically are really there. But for me, when I'm up there, my primary goal is everybody are people having fun,
Nice.
So the music to me is a secondary thing, but that's because I've come from this stand-up background where you're really attuned to the audience, as opposed to like when you're a musician, you're more in tune to what the music is that you're playing and trying to sort of let that out. So I think just giving yourself that space to have that failure is really important. And I think in some ways, if you can do things which are an either or, like there's no bad answer. It's like, is it this or this? That gives you an easy taste of failure, because you're like, okay, so this one's not as good, that's fine, and I can just keep building up like that, and then eventually, hopefully, failure still blindsides me sometimes, and I'm I'm annoyed by it, or I'm racked with disappointment, but that's just a natural part of things, and some days are just going to be like that, I think.
Yeah. We're failing because we're trying different things. Because you can have a risk-free life where you don't try anything and you'll never fail. The problem is you'll also feel really numb, because when we're not growing, we don't have that vibrancy around us. So failure feels pretty crap, and it's good to acknowledge it and go, this is crap. And it's also important because I'm growing. I'm learning new ways. What works, what doesn't. It's okay. As long as I'm not dying, it's good.
Danette, I was going to say, did you have any final thoughts today, or did you want to share anything else about recovering from a setback?
I think we had some really good conversations there. Actually, I was going to say one of the other setbacks I had was when, and I always get teary when I tell this, but when my brother Dave was killed in a car accident, and that's obviously huge, and you can hear the emotions. The other thing I'd say is give yourself time, because sometimes the setback is hard, and it's okay to go, I don't have to be on track like everyone else. I can process this in my own way to be able to get to where I need to be. And I think the world wants us sometimes to recover fast, and it's like, well, that's not necessarily how it works. So, oh, look at this. Connie just gave me a tissue. How beautiful is that? So thank you, Connie. So it's also recognising that, there will be some really big setbacks in your life. Don't try to rush through those. Seek help and be okay that it's, you're different on the other side of those setbacks. That's not a bad thing. You're learning more about yourself and, how to navigate life. And life will always have setbacks. Surround yourself by great people, learn from it. That's a pretty good life.
Absolutely. And I think also, thanks for sharing that, Danette.
No, you're welcome.
The other thing I was going to say is, if you're struggling to find people that are supporting you, maybe you're just living a very insular life, working from home, everything like that.
Yes.
I think a good tip is you can always look into whatever your own passions are outside of work, whether it's listening to a certain type of music, whether it's watching a type of film. And then if you can make it your job to just go out of your house to try and experience that, you're likely to meet people that are the same. If you're into books, people say just hang out in bookstores in the section that you're at. You can ask people, hey, do you have a recommendation? There's little ways that you can spark little conversations.
Totally.
And just accepting also that there is going to be a failure element to that. And that's okay. That's just part of it. It's not going to. You're not going to have 100% success rate. I think you'll be okay.
Yes.
Great.
And you'll find me in the bookstore.
Yes. Well, if you're looking for a great book to pick up, we do recommend The Adaptable Leader by Danette Fenton Menzies.
Yes.
Always good to plug that one. I hope that people have enjoyed this one. If you want to leave a message about any setbacks that you've had, or you want to give us a tip that you've got, either go to our YouTube or our Spotify. We've got little sections there. Like in the YouTube, just leave it in the comments. In Spotify, there's a little section under the podcast where you can put in a little comment. We want to thank everybody that's been listening and sharing. It's really nice to see the podcast growing. And to everybody, as always, have a magical week.